We're going to talk about and review the Trust Center settings. We're going to first look at trusted documents and then at trusted locations and publishers back in the Trust Center. We're going to talk about the settings when it comes to macros and add-ins, and then we'll take a look at some other settings in the Trust Center. So you're in Excel and you're working, and you've received a workbook from somebody else, and when you go to open it up, you get a message that might look like this. It says, security warning, macros have been disabled, and I can left-click that Enable Content, which will enable the macros. I'm trying to open up a workbook with a macro attached to it. The security setting is set to give me this message. That's the default setting, in fact, which we're going to look at in a second. When I left-click Enable Content, Excel will remember that I enabled the content and, in the process, made this a trusted document. It'll maintain a list in the registry of these trusted documents so that the next time I open up this workbook, as long as it's me that's logged into the computer and not somebody else, and as long as the file name hasn't changed or it hasn't been moved, and as long as somebody hasn't deleted the original file and replaced it with a file that will have a different creation date, the next time I open this up, I won't get that message. Excel will assume if I trusted it before, I'll trust it again. So the security settings can be found by going to Alt-FT, the Trust Center. The first screen you get 4 hyperlinks that'll take you to some information provided by Microsoft that's on the internet about the Trust Center. And we're just going to go straight to the Trust Center. As well as identifying documents that we trust, we can identify publishers that we trust. So what's a publisher? A publisher is somebody that's developed a workbook that has either a macro, an Activex control, or an add-in. When you open up a workbook that has one of these elements, or more than one of these elements, and it comes from an identifiable publisher, Excel will display a dialog box that allows you to add that publisher to this list. As you see, with this dialog box, I only have the ability to either view or remove the publishers. So a reputable publisher will have a digital signature that's valid and created by a reputable certificate authority. This particular publisher on my list has an expired signature, so I'm going to remove that from my list. Going down to trusted locations, you can identify certain locations that if you pull a file from this source, it'll automatically be a trusted document. If these locations are firewall protected, they're on your server, your network, you can add that location to this list, the default list, and here you have the ability to remove and modify any trusted locations. The trusted documents, again, are documents, workbooks that have either macros, Activex controls, or other active content. When we enabled the content at the beginning of this movie, we made that document a trusted document. We have the option to clear all of the trusted documents that are built up in the registry list. There's some specific settings for add-ins. You can require them to be signed by a trusted publisher. You can have Excel automatically disable the code for add-ins that are unsigned without even notifying you, or you can just disable all the add-ins, signed or not. The Activex settings are similar. We have 4 macro settings where you can either disable all of the macros without notification, so Excel won't notify you. You can disable the macros with notification, the default setting. That's why we got the notification to make that document a trusted document, the one that had the macro at the beginning of the movie. We can disable all of the macros except for digitally signed macros. If we choose this setting, we won't get any notification from Excel. It'll just disable all the unsigned macros, and we won't be aware that there's an unfunctioning macro in the workbook. And then the last setting, you can just enable all of the macros, which is just not a good idea. Protected view, all of these options are enabled by default, so you'll automatically get prompted as to whether you want to enable the content if you get a workbook from the internet, from a location that's not on your trusted location list, like the temporary internet file folder, or if you open up a file that's been attached to an Outlook email. The message bar gives you a notification as to whether content has been blocked or not. It's good to know that sometimes. There's settings for data connections and workbook links, where you can either enable all the workbook links and the data connections, you can be prompted about the data connections and workbook links, or you can choose the third option to disable all of the workbook links and data connections. The next bank of options allows you to refine what sort of firewall protection you can provide yourself at the file type level. With the open box checked, Excel will either block the file or open it up in protected view. And with the save box checked, Excel will prevent you from saving the file. And the last window has to do with your computer activity and the interactions between it and the rest of the world. All of these are checked by default, including having Microsoft download a file periodically to check for system problems. You can sign up for the Customer Experience Improvement Program, where they collect statistics, as it says, about stability problems, system configuration, and features you use most frequently. We have the Document Inspector that allows you to check for these 7 different things. It's suggested this is run before you share your document. I'm going to close that. And then we have some research and reference settings for translation involving language, and research options involving the research settings that enable you access to dictionaries, thesauruses, and other sites that provide content that you might want to utilize when you're researching some topic. So that's the Trust Center, where you can establish a list of trusted publishers, trusted locations, and trusted documents. You can refine the settings for add-ins, ActiveX controls, and macros. You can have all these workbooks that contain this active content open to protected view. You can have Excel provide you a message about the fact that there's content that's active in the workbook you're trying to open up. There's settings for external content like data connections and links. And there's a list of all sorts of document types that you can establish settings for at the document type level. And finally, there's some privacy options that you can set, the default being that you don't have much privacy.